Alright, so here we go. We're going to be going into the introduction of CNC milling. Right here we have our good friends Jarrett and Christian going to give us a little bit of a demonstration on what everyday milling looks like and what you should expect from actually running this machine. So one of the first key things that you must learn is how to probe the machine. Now, the probing process is basically giving the home address of where the part is actually located for the machine. So for instance, if you're going to look at your setup sheet, you look at which side the axis is on. Is it on the left hand side? Is it on the right hand side? Is it in the middle? Wherever it is, that's where you probe the actual part itself. Now, that part that you're going to probe is then going to be translated into the machine coding that is now the program. Once you probe your actual part itself, then you can go ahead and start setting your tool lengths and your tooling. Now, your tooling is going to be described heavily by the setup sheet. There's going to be a minimum and a maximum Z on how far it could stick out and how less it should stick out. So make sure that you follow those down to a pretty good degree. And you can usually eyeball this. However, if you're not sure, you can always use a caliper or ruler or a micrometer to measure this. Now, after you are done using Otis to actually measure your tools and to make sure that your tool lengths are all good to go, then you can start doing the process of running the program. Now, the program spindle speeds and everything else should be in line and intact. However, it is always a good thing to adjust your machine accordingly. So if you notice that a spindle speed, or an RPM as others might call it, is too high, you can adjust it with buttons, or you can also adjust it by actually going into the program and inputting a new number. That same thing applies for the feed rate. Now, the feed rate is how fast the machine moves back and forth or all around the actual machine, the actual program itself. The lower the feed rate, the slower the machine will move. The faster the feed rate, the faster the machine will move. So it all just depends on what you hear from the sound of the machine. Sound is your most key aspect to understanding what is actually going on, because coolant is a big blocking. You won't be able to see anything. It's like being a blind man in a dark cave in the middle of Nebraska. It's just really hard to see anything out there. Anyway, make sure that you understand coolant and what its functionality is. Basically, it's just to cool down the actual part and make sure that it doesn't ruin the part based off heat, because thing goes fast and it kind of creates a little bit of heat. Now, all these safety features are put into place so that way you don't mess with anything, or if something does happen by accident, nothing will hurt you. So those are the really good things about the machine. So you're always going to be safe. The control panel is your best friend. It will tell you what to do and what not to do. Make sure that your clamps are all correct. Most of the clamping will be done in the vise itself. However, there are times where you're going to be facing a part, which means that you're going to be taking off the bad stuff on a raw material, and you're going to be making it nice and shiny. It's really smooth and very shiny, and that is where a big part of clamping comes in. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that there are different tool holders hold different tools, and over time you will understand which tools to use and what not to use. So for instance, there are specific tool holders for only drills, there are specific tool holders for only end mills, there are specific tool holders for taps. It really just depends on what your part needs and what you're actually making. So keep that in mind, and also make sure that you put in the right tools for the right tool holders. Now, really nothing horrible will go wrong if it is in the wrong tool, but it's always best to be safer than sorry. And if you have to take out some pieces or some parts from the machine to make sure that doesn't happen, that is always a good thing to have. Now, also one key thing about probing. Another key thing about probing is that it's easily breakable. So don't break the part, please. It has feelings. And lastly, always make sure that you are always having your hand above the stop button, because if something goes horribly wrong, it could potentially save the part and save the machine. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy your journey. into milling.